Only the wounded physician heals, and then only to the extent he has healed himself. Have you ever felt drawn to someone who seemed to understand your pain almost too well? They listened deeply, held space, spoke like they knew the language of your soul. But something felt off, subtle, invisible, like your healing somehow kept them alive. What if I told you that not every healer wants you whole? What if your pain was feeding them? Because some people don't heal to free others. They heal to feel necessary. And the moment you no longer need them, they disappear. Or worse, they break you again. This isn't compassion. It's captivity in disguise. The wounded healer is the most dangerous archetype, especially when they haven't healed themselves. Do you know what makes the wounded healer so hard to recognize? They don't wear a mask made of ego. They wear a mask made of care. They don't dominate with volume. They dominate with softness, with attentiveness, with the illusion of safety. They are drawn to pain, not because they want to heal it, but because in your pain they find a role, a reason, a fragile sense of meaning that they never found within themselves. And so they become the savior, the fixer, the one who always knows what you need, even when you never asked. But behind every gesture of help, there's a silent whisper: don't get better too fast. Because if you heal, they lose their purpose. This archetype doesn't scream to be seen. It whispers to be needed. And that's what makes it so insidious. You find yourself opening up, deeper than you have with anyone. You let them in because they feel safe. You trust their insight because they've been through hell. You believe their empathy is clean because it's soft, because it's gentle. But there's a wound underneath the wisdom, unseen, unclaimed, and that wound is driving everything. You start to realize that your healing process feels strangely heavy, like someone else is carrying it with you, but not to lighten your load, to hold it, to stay tethered to you through it. They don't say it aloud, but you feel it. If you grow too strong, you'll outgrow them. So without knowing why, you shrink again. You falter. You stay broken, just enough to keep the connection. This isn't love. This isn't healing. This is emotional codependency wrapped in spiritual language. And if they haven't faced their own wound, if they haven't truly integrated it, then every time they touch your soul, they leave fingerprints of their unhealed past. The most dangerous manipulation is the one that feels like care, because it doesn't chain your body, it binds your spirit. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've mistaken your captor for your healer. Jung once wrote that only the wounded physician heals, because only those who have suffered deeply can truly understand the suffering of others. But Jung never said that every wounded soul should become a healer. He said that the wound must first be integrated, seen, accepted, transformed, not worn like armor, not hidden behind virtue. Because when the wound remains unconscious, when it festers in the dark, untouched by real introspection, it becomes something far more dangerous, a source of identity. Now the healer no longer heals to serve. They heal to soothe their own fear, to silence the voice that says, if I'm not saving someone, I am nothing. And this is where the archetype twists. the healer begins to attract brokenness, not as a sacred calling, but as a mirror of their own disowned pain. They gravitate toward the wounded, but not to liberate, to tether. They wrap their guidance in tenderness, but every word carries an echo of control. I know what's best for you. I've walked this path before. Trust me. This is how healing should look. It sounds like wisdom. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the wound speaking underneath. You'll hear the unspoken rule, don't grow beyond me. Because once you integrate your pain, once you rise above the storm, you reflect back to them the work they haven't done. That's when the mask begins to crack. The spiritual mentor becomes passive-aggressive. The loving guide becomes subtly resentful. The one who once nurtured your growth now flinches at your strength. This isn't healing. It's hierarchy dressed in humility. And that's the danger Jung warned of. Not the wounded healer who transforms, but the one who hides behind their pain like a crown, who leads others into light, but never dares to enter their own darkness. Because true healing begins where the ego ends. And if the ego is still feeding off the role of the healer, then no matter how sacred the words, the energy remains inverted. It binds, it performs, it heals, just enough to keep you dependent. In the ancient mystery schools, there was a warning whispered only to initiates: power without purification corrupts the soul. Because when spiritual energy flows through an unhealed vessel, it doesn't heal, it distorts. The wounded healer, when unconscious, becomes not a bridge, but a trap. Their empathy is sharp, refined, almost psychic. They know where your pain lives because it mirrors their own. But if they haven't cleansed that reflection, what they offer isn't medicine. It's energetic entanglement. This is what mystics called inverted compassion, when the act of helping is no longer about liberation, but about tethering you to the healer's unresolved shadow. They mean well. They believe they're guiding you. But behind the compassion is something heavier. Ego disguised as service. And the deeper danger? You feel it working. You feel seen, heard, held. But your healing plateaus. Your energy feels drained. Your clarity turns cloudy. Because you've entered a sacred exchange with someone who hasn't purified their channel. And now, your pain is feeding something in them. A hidden need to matter, to be worshipped, to be the one who knows. This is why in esoteric traditions, true healing work required ritual, silence, and radical self-honesty. Not just knowledge, not just charisma, but death of the false self. Again and again and again. Because unpurified power is like fire in the wrong hands. It doesn't just burn the healer. It scorches the people who come to them for light. Even the myth of Chiron, the archetypal wounded healer, carries a hidden warning. Yes, he taught heroes. Yes, he was wise. But he could never heal himself. And that wound became the very source of his wisdom and his torment. Chiron's gift was forged in agony. But it was sacred because he never used it for control. He taught from humility. He withdrew into silence. And ultimately, he sacrificed himself to free another. That's the difference. The unconscious wounded healer craves recognition. The conscious one vanishes from the story the moment your soul stands on its own. Because in the esoteric path, the goal isn't to be followed, it's to disappear, leaving only the truth behind. Now comes the part no one likes to face. Not looking at them, but at you. Because this archetype doesn't just live in mentors or mystics. It lives in anyone who's ever felt safer helping others than sitting with their own silence. And maybe, if you're honest, you've worn this mask too. Not out of malice, but because healing others made you feel less broken. Because being needed gave you purpose when you couldn't find your own. It's subtle, it's seductive, it feels like service, but it's tethered to self-worth. You listen to everyone's wounds, but can't sit alone with your own. You're always the strong one, but quietly resent that no one checks on you. You hold space for everyone, except the parts of yourself you're still afraid to face. So here's the mirror. If no one needed your wisdom, your strength, your insight, who would you be? Could you still love yourself if no one came to you for answers? This is the test, because the unconscious wounded healer builds their identity around being the anchor for others. They don't know who they are, without someone else's pain to carry. But true healing, the sacred kind, asks you to stop performing, to stop fixing, to turn your gaze inward, and ask a much more dangerous question. What part of me am I trying to heal through someone else? You may not like the answer. It might unearth grief, fear, shame, but that's where the real medicine lives. So sit with it, in silence, in stillness, not to fix it, but to feel it. The one who heals from love leaves no trace behind, no need for gratitude, no tether of dependence. But the one who heals from fear, they bind you softly, with wisdom, with care, with ego, not out of malice, but because your pain gives them purpose. And when you heal, they feel abandoned. This is the shadow of the wounded healer. They don't want your freedom. They want to be necessary. But true healing asks for nothing. It offers space, not control. It disappears the moment you can stand alone. So ask yourself, do I help to serve or to be seen? Because one path liberates. The other keeps both of you trapped. The most dangerous healer is the one who hasn't healed themselves, but still needs your wounds to feel whole. The one who heals from love leaves no trace of their ego behind. They don't bind you with gratitude. They don't tether you through debt. They don't linger in your healing story like a shadow waiting to be acknowledged. They vanish like a breath, like a bridge that disappears once you've crossed it. But the one who heals from fear always leaves a mark, a subtle imprint of control, a residue of expectation, because they never really wanted your freedom. They wanted your dependence. This is the shadow of the wounded healer, not evil, not malicious, just unconscious. It is the part of you that would rather be needed than be at peace. The part that mistakes control for connection, that fears who you are when you're not being helpful, or when no one is watching. But now you know. Now you've seen the mask, in others maybe. but more importantly, in yourself. And with that awareness comes a choice to continue the cycle helping others as a way to avoid your own pain, or to stop, to pause, to heal from the inside out, so that when you hold space again, you do so with empty hands. Not to change them, not to save them, but to witness, to serve, to love without attachment. Because real healing isn't loud. It doesn't seek recognition. It doesn't post itself online for approval. It happens in the quiet moments when no one sees and nothing is expected in return. So ask yourself again, am I healing from love or from fear? Because one path liberates, and the other, no matter how spiritual it looks, builds another cage, this time draped in white robes and sacred words. The healer who has met their own darkness no longer fears yours. They don't need your brokenness to feel whole. They want your freedom, even if it means they're forgotten. And that is the most dangerous healer of all, the one who needs nothing from you. Only then does the medicine become pure.